You're nothing but dead weight in your own house." Jenna's piercing words cut through the air like a dagger, striking at the core of my being. My heart pounded as I watched her face contort with rage, spewing vitriol at my husband, Ron, and me. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, but the tension had been building for weeks. Jenna, my son Derek's wife, had grown increasingly hostile and dismissive towards us. She had always been a bit of a firecracker, but her behavior had taken a drastic turn for the worse. "Why should we have to put up with this?" she continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "You two are a burden, and it's time you realized it." Ron reached out to her, his gentle demeanor a stark contrast to her fury. "Jenna, please, let's not escalate this any further." But it was too late. The veil had been lifted, revealing the true nature of our once-beloved daughter-in-law. "Don't you dare try to placate me, old man." She spat. "You and your pathetic wife have worn out your welcome in this house." Derek, my son, sat in stunned silence, unable or unwilling to intervene. It was as if he didn't recognize the woman he had married. I couldn't take it anymore. "How dare you speak to us like that?" I said, my voice trembling with rage and disbelief. "We are your family, and we have given everything to support you and Derek." Jenna let out a derisive laugh. "Support? You call leeching off our finances and invading our privacy support? You're delusional." Her words stung like a slap in the face. Ron and I had always been hard-working, contributing significantly to the household expenses and taking care of the chores. But Jenna's manipulation had twisted the truth, making us seem like a burden rather than the loving family we had always been. I looked to Derek, hoping he would step in and defend us, but he remained silent, his head hanging low. Jenna sneered at us. "It's time for you to pack your bags and get out. This is our home, and we don't need you here anymore." As she stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of anger and confusion in her wake, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the sweet, responsible young woman we had once welcomed into our family. It was as if a dark veil had been lifted, exposing the true Jenna, cold, manipulative, and utterly devoid of compassion. Ron and I sat in stunned silence, our hearts heavy with the realization that the happy family we had cherished was nothing more than an illusion. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but one thing was certain: we would not allow Jenna's tyranny to continue unchallenged. The next few days were tense, to say the least. Jenna's outburst had created an unbearable atmosphere in our home. Ron and I treaded carefully, trying to avoid further confrontation, but it was clear that the damage had been done. Jenna's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would go from periods of sullen silence to outbursts of rage, lashing out at us for the smallest perceived offenses. "What's the matter with you, Jenna?" Derek asked one evening, his voice strained. "You've been acting so strange lately." Jenna shot him a withering glare. "Don't pretend you don't know what's going on, Derek. Your parents are the problem, not me." "But they've done nothing wrong," Derek protested. "They're just trying to help us out." "Help?" Jenna let out a harsh laugh. "They're nothing but a burden, and you're too blind to see it." Derek shook his head, his frustration evident. "I don't understand what's gotten into you. This isn't like you at all." "You're right, Derek," Jenna said, her voice dripping with contempt. "This isn't the me you thought you knew. That was just an act, and now the real me is coming out." Ron and I exchanged a worried glance. Jenna's words sent a chill down my spine. Had our entire relationship with her been a lie? The tension continued to escalate in the following days, with Jenna becoming increasingly hostile and volatile. She would deliberately ignore us or make cutting remarks, shattering the illusion of the perfect family we had once believed in. It all came to a head at a family dinner, where Jenna's behavior reached a new low. As we sat around the table, she began to berate us, her words laced with venom. "You two are nothing but leeches, sucking the life out of our family." She spat. "You're a constant drain on our resources and our happiness." "Jenna, please," Ron pleaded, his voice shaking. "We've always contributed our fair share. Why are you treating us like this?" "Because you deserve it," Jenna snarled. "You're both pathetic and weak, clinging to your son and his wife for support. It's time you learned your place." I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. This was the woman who had once professed her love and admiration for us, who had promised to be a loyal and devoted family member. But now, her true colors were on display, and they were darker than we could have ever imagined. Derek tried to intervene, but Jenna shut him down with a withering glare. "Don't you dare defend them, Derek. They're not worth it." As Jenna stormed out of the room, leaving us in a state of shock and disbelief, I realized that our family was in crisis. We had been blind to Jenna's true nature, and now we were paying the price. But I was determined not to let her manipulate and control us any longer. It was time to take action and reclaim our dignity. In the aftermath of Jenna's outburst, Derek seemed to be questioning everything he thought he knew about his wife. He confided in me that he was struggling to reconcile the woman he had married with the one who had been tormenting us. "Mom, I just don't understand what's going on with her," he said, his voice heavy with confusion and pain. "It's like she's a completely different person." I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I know, honey. Her behavior has been shocking, to say the least." "I need to get to the bottom of this," Derek said, a newfound determination in his eyes. "There has to be an explanation for why she's acting this way." I nodded, hoping that he would find the answers he was seeking. I had long since given up trying to make sense of Jenna's actions. A few days later, Derek approached me with a grim expression on his face. "Mom, I hired a private investigator to look into Jenna's past," he said. "What they uncovered is disturbing." My heart sank as he began to reveal the details of Jenna's history. It seemed that her manipulative behavior was nothing new. She had a pattern of latching onto wealthy families and exploiting them for her own gain. "She's been involved in multiple scams and fraud cases," Derek said, his voice shaking. "She's even been married before, to a wealthy businessman who she cleaned out before leaving him penniless." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But how could she have hidden all of this?" I asked, feeling sick to my stomach. "She's a master manipulator," Derek replied. "She presents herself as a perfect devoted partner, but it's all an act. She's been playing me this whole time." As the full scope of Jenna's deceit became clear, Derek's face crumpled with anguish. "I can't believe I let her do this to us," he said, burying his head in his hands. "I should have seen it coming." "This isn't your fault, Derek," I said, trying to comfort him. "She fooled us all with her lies." But even as I tried to reassure him, I could see the conflict written on his face. He had invested so much in his relationship with Jenna, and the revelation of her true nature had shaken him to his core. "What am I going to do, Mom?" he asked, his eyes pleading with me for guidance. "I can't stay with her after everything she's done, but it's still so hard to let go." I took a deep breath, knowing that I had to be strong for him. "You need to make a choice," I said, my voice firm. "Jenna has shown her true colors, and she's not going to change. If you stay with her, she'll continue to manipulate and exploit you, just like she's done to so many others." Derek nodded, his jaw set in determination. "You're right," he said. "I can't let her continue to hurt us like this. It's time to take a stand." As he left the room, I could see the resolve in his eyes. Jenna's web of lies was finally unraveling, and we were going to make her pay for the pain she had caused our family. The road ahead would be difficult, but we were united in our mission to seek justice and reclaim our dignity. In the weeks that followed, the tension in our household reached a boiling point. Jenna's hostility seemed to escalate with every passing day, as if she were determined to make our lives a living hell. It all came to a head when I suffered a minor injury while doing yard work. Nothing too serious, but it left me with a sprained ankle and limited mobility. Jenna, of course, saw this as an opportunity to further torment us. "You know, with your injury, it might be better if you and Ron moved in with us for a while," she said, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. "We wouldn't want you to struggle with the stairs and getting around the house." I narrowed my eyes, sensing the ulterior motive behind her offer. "That's very kind of you, Jenna, but we'll manage just fine." "Nonsense," she insisted, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's the least we can do to help out our family." Derek, sensing my hesitation, stepped in. "Mom, Jenna's right. It might be better if you and Dad stay with us for a bit until you're back on your feet." I glanced at Ron, who shrugged helplessly. We both knew that fighting Jenna's suggestion would only lead to more conflict. "Fine," I conceded, trying to hide my reluctance. "If you insist." Jenna's smile widened, but there was a gleam in her eye that sent a chill down my spine. Excellent. We'll get the guest room ready right away. As we settled into our temporary living arrangement, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jenna had ulterior motives. Sure enough, it didn't take long for her true intentions to become clear. She began to shirk all household responsibilities, leaving the cleaning, cooking, and laundry to Ron and me. Whenever we tried to protest, she would simply wave us off with a dismissive, "You're the one staying here. The least you can do is help out." Derek, caught in the middle, seemed torn between defending us and trying to keep the peace with his wife. "Jenna, this isn't right," he would say, but she would brush him off with a flippant remark. "Don't be so dramatic, Derek. They're just doing their fair share." As the weeks wore on, Jenna's behavior became increasingly erratic and controlling. She would deliberately isolate us from Derek, making sure we were never alone with him for long. It was as if she were afraid we would turn him against her. "She's trying to drive a wedge between us," I confided in Ron one night as we lay in bed, exhausted from the day's emotional turmoil. Ron nodded warily. "I know. She's determined to break our family apart." As the tension continued to mount, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Jenna's manipulative tactics were pushing us to the breaking point, and I feared that soon something would have to give. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. Jenna's harassment seemed to know no bounds. As the days wore on, her tactics became increasingly brazen and cruel. "Why are you two still here?" She would sneer whenever Ron and I entered a room. "Aren't you overstaying your welcome?" Derek, to his credit, tried to intervene. "Jenna, that's enough. They're my parents, and they have every right to be here." But Jenna would simply laugh in his face. "Oh, Derek, always the dutiful son. When are you going to realize that they're using you?" Ron and I would exchange helpless glances, our hearts breaking as we watched our son caught in the crossfire. Jenna's behavior grew increasingly erratic and unpredictable. She would go from periods of cold silence to outbursts of rage, lashing out at us for the smallest perceived offenses. "What's the matter with you?" Derek would plead, his eyes filled with anguish. "Why are you treating them like this?" "Because they deserve it," Jenna would shout, her face contorted with fury. "They're nothing but leeches, draining the life out of our family." I couldn't believe the venom spewing from her lips. This was supposed to be the woman who had promised to love and cherish our family, but now she seemed hell-bent on destroying us. The breaking point came one evening as we sat down for dinner. Jenna, as usual, had shirked all responsibility for preparing the meal, leaving it to Ron and me to cook and serve. As we all sat down at the table, Jenna looked around with a sneer. "What's this? You two couldn't even be bothered to set the table properly?" I bristled at her accusation. "We did our best, Jenna. If you have a problem with it, maybe you should have helped out." Jenna's eyes flashed with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home?" she snarled. "You ungrateful old hag." Before I could respond, Jenna slammed her hands on the table, causing the dishes to rattle. "That's it. I've had enough of you two dragging us down. It's time for you to pack your bags and get out." Derek jumped to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Jenna, stop this. They're not going anywhere." But Jenna ignored him, her eyes boring into me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "You have 24 hours to gather your things and leave," she said, her voice low and menacing. "If you're not out by then, I'll have the police remove you." Tears stung my eyes as I watched Derek wrestle with his emotions, torn between defending us and trying to reason with his wife. As Jenna stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake, I knew that the time for passivity was over. We had tried to reason with her, to appeal to her better nature, but all our efforts had been in vain. Ron and I exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between us. We had endured enough. It was time to take a stand and reclaim our dignity. "Pack your bags," I said to Ron, my voice steely with determination. "We're leaving this house, and we're not going quietly." From that moment on, there was no turning back. We were going to fight fire with fire, and Jenna was about to face the consequences of her actions. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of anger and determination. Ron and I wasted no time in packing our belongings, our hands trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. "I can't believe she's doing this to us," Ron said, his voice thick with emotion as he folded his clothes into a suitcase. "After everything we've done for her." I shook my head, my jaw clenched. "She's shown her true colors, Ron. We can't let her continue to walk all over us like this." As we packed, we could hear the sound of raised voices coming from the living room. Derek and Jenna were engaged in a heated argument, their words punctuated by the occasional crash of something being thrown or knocked over. "Can't believe you're kicking them out." Derek's voice rang out, laced with disbelief and anger. "They're your family too, Jenna." "They're dead weight, Derek," Jenna shouted back. "They've been holding us back for far too long. It's time we cut them loose." I winced at her words, my heart aching for my son. He was caught in the middle of a war he never asked for, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his parents. As we finished packing our last few belongings, Derek appeared in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice heavy with anguish. "I tried to talk her out of this, but she won't listen to reason." I pulled him into a tight embrace, fighting back tears. "It's not your fault, honey. Jenna's made her choice, and we have to respect that." Derek shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know who she is anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "The woman I married has become a stranger to me." As we headed towards the front door, our bags in hand, Jenna appeared, a triumphant sneer plastered on her face. "Well, look who's finally leaving," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's about time you two learned your place." I bristled at her words, my anger rising like a tidal wave. "You're a twisted, manipulative woman, Jenna," I spat, "and you're going to regret the day you turned on this family." Jenna simply laughed, unfazed by my words. "Empty threats, as always. You two have no power here. This is my house, and I decide who stays and who goes." As she spoke, I caught a glimpse of Derek standing behind her, his face twisted into a mask of anguish and conflict. It was as if he were watching the slow destruction of everything he had believed in, powerless to stop it. With one final glare at Jenna, Ron and I turned and walked out the door, our heads held high. We had been forced out of our own home, but we refused to let her see our pain. As we loaded our bags into the car and prepared to drive away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality wash over me. Our ties to Jenna had been severed, perhaps for good. But in that moment, I knew that we had made the right choice. We had reclaimed our dignity and refused to be victimized any longer. As we pulled away from the house, leaving our old life behind, I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of Derek standing in the doorway, his shoulders slumped in defeat. It was a painful sight, but it only strengthened my resolve. We were free of Jenna's tyranny, and now it was time to focus on the next chapter of our lives. The road ahead would be difficult, but we were determined to make her pay for the pain she had inflicted on our family. The days following our departure from the house were filled with a tense silence. Ron and I had found temporary refuge in a modest apartment, but the weight of what had happened hung heavy in the air. Derek had remained distant, no doubt struggling to come to terms with the fracturing of his marriage. I longed to reach out to him, to offer comfort and support, but I knew he needed time to process everything on his own terms. It wasn't until a week later that he finally came to see us, his face etched with anguish and determination. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," he said as we ushered him into the small living room. "Of course, honey," I replied, my heart aching at the sight of his pain. "What's on your mind?" Derek took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice steady. "I'm leaving Jenna." Ron and I exchanged a glance, equal parts surprised and relieved. "Are you sure about this, son?" Ron asked, placing a comforting hand on Derek's shoulder. Derek nodded, his jaw set. "It's the only choice I have left. Her behavior has become too much to bear, and I can't continue living with someone who treats my family with such cruelty and disrespect." As he spoke, the full weight of his decision seemed to hit him, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I thought I knew her," he said, his voice breaking. "But the woman I married is gone, replaced by someone cold and heartless." I pulled him into a tight embrace, fighting back my own emotions. "I'm so sorry, Derek," I said, my voice thick with sorrow. "No one should have to go through what you're experiencing." Derek pulled back, his face hardening with resolve. It's not just her treatment of you and Dad, he continued. She's been unfaithful, and I've found evidence of her involvement in financial fraud and other illegal activities. I couldn't help but gasp at the revelation. Jenna's been cheating and breaking the law? I asked, my heart sinking. Derek nodded grimly. It seems her manipulative behavior has been a pattern throughout her life. She's been using me, just like she used her previous husband before me. As the full scope of Jenna's deception became clear, a wave of anger washed over me. She had not only tormented our family, but had also betrayed Derek's trust in the worst possible way. That's it, I said, my voice steely with determination. She's gone too far this time. We can't let her get away with this. Derek looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You're right, Mom. It's time we fought back and held her accountable for her actions. As we sat together, discussing our next steps and strategizing our approach, I could sense a shift in the air. Derek had finally awakened to the truth about Jenna, and he was no longer willing to be a passive victim in her web of lies and deceit. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil. But we were united in our resolve to seek justice and reclaim our dignity. Jenna's reign of terror over our family was coming to an end, and she was about to face the consequences of her actions. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as we prepared to confront Jenna and reclaim our belongings from the house. Derek had enlisted the help of his uncle, a former law enforcement officer, to accompany us and ensure a peaceful resolution. As we pulled up to the familiar driveway, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. This was it, the final showdown with the woman who had wreaked so much havoc on our family. Remember, stay calm and don't engage with her unless absolutely necessary, Derek's Uncle Tom instructed us. We're just here to retrieve your belongings and leave. Any confrontation should be avoided. Ron and I nodded, our jaws set with determination. We had come too far to let Jenna's mind games derail us now. As we approached the front door, it swung open and Jenna appeared, her face contorted into a sneer. Well, if it isn't the prodigal family returning, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. Derek stepped forward, his shoulders squared. We're not here to cause trouble, Jenna, he said, his voice steady. We've come to collect our belongings and leave, that's all. Jenna's eyes narrowed as she took in the presence of Tom. Who's this, then? Your muscle to try and intimidate me? She let out a harsh laugh. Don't bother. You're not scaring anyone. Tom remained impassive, his years of training evident in his calm demeanor. Ma'am, we're not here to cause any problems. We just want to retrieve the belongings and be on our way. Jenna's eyes flashed with rage as she turned to Derek. You really think you can just waltz back in here and take whatever you want? She snarled. This is my house, and you have no right to anything in it. Derek held up a hand, his face hardening. That's enough, Jenna. You know full well that many of those belongings are my parents' property. We're not leaving until we get them back. For a moment, it seemed like Jenna might escalate the situation further, her body tensed like a coiled spring. But as she took in the determined expressions on our faces and the presence of Tom, her resolve seemed to falter. Fine, she spat, stepping aside. Take your trash and get out of my sight. As we entered the house and began retrieving our belongings, Jenna paced around us like a caged animal, her eyes burning with hatred. You think you've won, don't you? She sneered, her voice trembling with anger. Well, this isn't over. You'll pay for this, all of you. Derek paused in his task, turning to face her. Enough, Jenna. We're not here to fight with you. Just let us take our things and leave in peace. Jenna's face twisted into an ugly sneer. Peace? You want peace after everything you've done to me? She let out a bitter laugh. You're all pathetic. You'll regret this, mark my words. As we loaded the last of our belongings into the car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The battle was won, and Jenna's reign of terror had finally come to an end. As we drove away, leaving Jenna's angry shouts behind us, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her standing on the porch, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. In that moment, she looked small and powerless, her threats ringing hollow. We had reclaimed our dignity and refused to be bullied any longer. Jenna's downfall was complete, and she was left alone to face the consequences of her actions. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with legal battles and the emotional turmoil of Derek's divorce. But we were united in our resolve to seek justice and rebuild our lives, free from the tyranny that had once threatened to destroy us. As we drove into the sunset, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and determination. We had faced adversity head-on and emerged victorious, and now it was time to move forward, stronger and more resilient than ever before.